Human plague is rare in most parts of the world as of 2023. Routine vaccination is not needed other than for those at particularly high risk of exposure, nor for people living in areas with enzootic plague, meaning it occurs at regular, predictable rates in populations and specific areas, such as the western United States. It is not even indicated for most travelers to countries with known recent reported cases, particularly if their travel is limited to urban areas with modern hotels. The United States CDC thus only recommends vaccination for 1. All laboratory and field personnel who are working with Y. pestis organisms resistant to antimicrobials. 2. People engaged in aerosol experiments with Y. pestis, and 3. People engaged in field operations in areas with enzootic plague where preventing exposure is not possible, such as some disaster areas. 27. A systematic review by the Cochrane Collaboration found no studies of sufficient quality to make any statement on the efficacy of the vaccine. 28. Early diagnosis. Diagnosing plague early leads to a decrease in transmission or spread of the disease. 21. Prophylaxis. Pre-exposure prophylaxis for first responders and healthcare providers who will care for patients with pneumonic plague is not considered necessary as long as standard and droplet precautions can be maintained. 7. In cases of surgical mask shortages, patient overcrowding, poor ventilation in hospital wards or other crises, pre-exposure prophylaxis might be warranted if sufficient supplies of antimicrobials are available. 7. Post-exposure prophylaxis should be considered for people who had close and LT 6 feet sustained contact with a patient with pneumonic plague and were not wearing adequate personal protective equipment. 7. Antimicrobial post-exposure prophylaxis also can be considered for laboratory workers accidentally exposed to infectious materials and people who had close and LT 6 feet or direct contact with infected animals, such as veterinary staff, pet owners, and hunters. 7. Specific recommendations on pre- and post-exposure prophylaxis are available in the clinical guidelines on treatment and prophylaxis of plague published in 2021. 7. Treatments. If diagnosed in time, the various forms of plague are usually highly responsive to antibiotic therapy. 6. 21. The antibiotics often used are streptomycin, chloramphenicol and tetracycline. Amongst the newer generation of antibiotics, gentamicin and doxycycline have proven effective in monotherapeutic treatment of plague. 6. 29. Guidelines on treatment and prophylaxis of plague were published by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in 2021. 7. The plague bacterium could develop drug resistance and again become a major health threat. One case of a drug-resistant form of the bacterium was found in Madagascar in 1995. 30. Further outbreaks in Madagascar were reported in November 2014, 31, and October 2017. 32. Epidemiology. Distribution of plague-infected animals. 1998 globally about 600 cases are reported a year. 2. In 2017, the countries with the most cases include the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Madagascar and Peru. 2. It has historically occurred in large outbreaks, with the best known being the Black Death in the 14th century which resulted in more than 50 million dead. 2. In recent years, cases have been distributed between small seasonal outbreaks which occur primarily in Madagascar, and sporadic outbreaks or isolated cases in endemic areas. 2. In 2022 the possible origin of all modern strands of Yersinia pestis DNA was found in human remains in 3 graves located in Kyrgyzstan. dated to 1338 and 1339. The Siege of Kaffa in Crimea in 1346 is known to have been the first plague outbreak with following strands, later to spread over Europe. Sequencing DNA compared to other ancient and modern strands paints a family tree of the bacteria. Bacteria today affecting marmots in Kyrgyzstan are closest to the strand found in the graves, suggesting this is also the location where plague transferred from animals to humans. 33. Biological weapon. The plague has a long history as a biological weapon. Historical accounts from ancient China and medieval Europe details the use of infected animal carcasses, such as cows or horses, and human carcasses, by the Xiongnu/Huns, Mongols, Turks and other groups, to contaminate enemy water supplies. Han Dynasty General Huo Qubing is recorded to have died of such contamination while engaging in warfare against the Xiongnu. Plague victims were also reported to have been tossed by catapult into cities under siege. 34. In 1347, the Genoese possession of Kaffa, a great trade emporium on the Crimean Peninsula, came under siege by an army of Mongol warriors of the Golden Horde under the command of Jani Beg. After a protracted siege during which the Mongol army was reportedly withering from the disease, they decided to use the infected corpses as a biological weapon. The corpses were catapulted over the city walls, infecting the inhabitants. This event might have led to the transfer of the Black Death via their ships into the south of Europe, possibly explaining its rapid spread. 35. During World War II, the Japanese army developed weaponized plague, based on the breeding and release of large numbers of fleas. During the Japanese occupation of Manchuria, Unit 731 deliberately infected Chinese, Korean and Manchurian civilians and prisoners of war with the plague bacterium. These subjects, termed maruta or logs, were then studied by dissection, others by vivisection while still conscious. Members of the unit such as Shio Ishii were exonerated from the Tokyo Tribunal by Douglas MacArthur, but 12 of them were prosecuted in the Khabarovsk war crime trials in 1949, during which some admitted having spread bubonic plague within a 36-kilometer, 22 mi, radius around the city of Changde. 36. Ishii innovated bombs containing live mice and fleas, with very small explosive loads, to deliver fluoronized microbes, overcoming the problem of the explosive killing the infected animal and insect with use of a ceramic, rather than metal, casing for the warhead. While no records survive of the actual usage of the ceramic shells, prototypes exist and are believed to have been used in experiments during WWII. 37. 38. After World War II, both the United States and the Soviet Union developed means of weaponizing pneumonic plague. Experiments included various delivery methods, vacuum drying, sizing the bacterium, developing strains resistant to antibiotics, combining the bacterium with other diseases, such as diphtheria, and genetic engineering. Scientists who worked in USSR bioweapons programs have stated that the Soviet effort was formidable and that large stocks of weaponized plague bacteria were produced. Information on many of the Soviet and US projects is largely unavailable. Aerosolized pneumonic plague remains the most significant threat. 39, 40, 41. The plague can be easily treated with antibiotics. Some countries, such as the United States, have large supplies on hand if such an attack should occur, making the threat less severe. 42. See also. Timeline of plague. References. Symptoms plague. CDC September 2015. Retrieved the 8th of November, 2000.